Welcome back, traveler. Tonight we step quietly into one of the oldest riddles whispered through human history, the thought that we might not be alone. Every land, every age, has lifted its eyes to the night sky and felt the same pull of wonder. In caves deep underground, people sketched shapes that seemed to reach beyond their world. On mountains and deserts, monuments rose like arrows pointing to the heavens. Ancient tales were told and retold, carrying echoes that feel older than memory itself. Were these only dreams, or fragments of something real? Shadows of watchers who came from the stars and never truly left. Stay with me as we drift through the centuries, listening for the faint voices of the past and searching for signs that we were never alone. And if you enjoy unraveling these strange mysteries with me, remember to like the video, share your own theories in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey into boring history for sleep. Now let's begin. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world as it must have been tens of thousands of years ago. There are no cities, no roads, no hum of electricity in the background. The land is raw and untamed, covered with forests, mountains, rivers, and endless plains where animals roam freely. The only shelter for humans is what they can build with their hands, or what nature provides in caves and rocky overhangs. Fire is the most powerful tool they know. They are hunters and gatherers, living day to day. Yet even in this ancient time, their minds turn toward something beyond survival. They look up at the stars, they wonder about shapes in the sky, and they leave behind markings on stone that carry mysteries across millennia. In these caves, under the flickering glow of torches, our ancestors drew not only animals and hunting scenes, but also strange beings. In Val Camonica, a valley in northern Italy, where thousands of petroglyphs are carved into rock, some images are unlike anything else. They show figures with large round heads, as if encased in helmets, with beams or rays emerging from them. Some appear to wear suits that separate them from their surroundings, with lines suggesting limbs encased in coverings. Archaeologists study these carvings and explain them as stylized depictions of gods, shamans, or symbolic figures tied to ritual life. Yet to modern eyes, conditioned by science fiction and reports of space travelers, these figures look uncannily like astronauts. The carvings are between 8,000 and 10,000 years old, long before any idea of machines or technology existed. How did such images enter the imagination of prehistoric people? The mystery does not stop in Italy. Across the world, in the deserts of Africa, the Tassili Naja caves in Algeria hold paintings created as early as 12,000 years ago. Amid images of animals and hunters, there are beings with bulbous heads and large round eyes. Some wear shapes that look like suits. The most famous is called the Great Martian God, a towering figure with round features and an otherworldly stance. Again, scholars see ritual masks, dances, and symbolic portrayals of spirits. But for those drawn to the question of extraterrestrials, these are tantalizing signs. Could our ancestors have seen visitors from the stars and painted what they witnessed with the only tools they had? Or were they expressing inner visions, dreams, or altered states of consciousness during rituals? Visions that took on forms strange even to themselves. When we picture these ancient artists, huddled with charcoal and ochre pigments, tracing their visions onto stone walls, it is easy to forget how dark their nights must have been. Without electricity, the stars blazed with a brilliance we cannot imagine. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light. Comets, meteors, and the slow movements of planets were all more vivid. A child growing up in that world would see the sky each night as a theater of wonders. Could it be that such a sky inspired them to imagine beings from beyond, giving rise to these strange depictions? Perhaps what we call aliens were, in their minds, spirits born from the night sky itself. But the consistency of certain forms nags at us. Round heads, radiant lines, bodies encased in shapes. These motifs appear in distant cultures that never contacted one another. From Europe to Africa, even in the Americas, echoes of similar imagery exist. In the rocks of Utah, the ancestral Puebloan people left petroglyphs that show figures with large heads and strange eyes. In the deserts of Australia, Aboriginal art tells of the Wangina, sky beings with round faces and no mouths, painted on cliffs and sacred sites. Were these simply archetypal forms arising in human imagination again and again? Or was there something universal that people actually saw? It is worth pausing here and asking why ancient people painted anything at all. Painting was not survival. It did not put food in the stomach or protect from predators. It took time, energy, and focus. Yet they chose to mark their world with symbols. This tells us something about the human mind. Even at its earliest stages, it was restless, searching for meaning, reaching for connection with something larger. In that search, they may have found shapes and beings that they did not fully understand. Archaeologists argue for caution. They remind us that to project modern ideas of aliens and astronauts onto ancient art risks distorting it. The people of those times had their own cosmologies, their own mythologies, their own explanations for what they experienced. The helmet-like heads might represent headdresses worn during ritual dances. The radiant lines could symbolize spiritual energy, power, or divine presence. To them, these were not astronauts, but spirits of fertility, ancestors, or guardians of the hunt. Still, the possibility lingers. What if both views carry a grain of truth? What if spirits and visitors from beyond were not separate in their eyes? Perhaps the distinction between alien and divine was not as sharp for them as it is for us. Let us imagine a night in Val Camonica, thousands of years ago. A group gathers at the foot of the cliffs. The firelight dances on their faces. An elder speaks of visions from the sky, of beings that came down in brightness, offering signs of knowledge or warning. The children listen wide-eyed, their minds filling with images. The next day, a skilled carver begins to etch the vision into rock. The image is simple yet strange, a figure with a round head, rays streaming outward. To him it represents what was seen, whether real or dreamed. He cannot know that millennia later others will stand before it and wonder if he was describing an alien. To him, it is a mark of connection, a way to remember and pass on the story. Across the world in the Tassili caves, perhaps something similar took place. Hunters returned from a long journey and spoke of glowing figures in the desert light. They described shapes unlike men, tall and silent. The tribe gathered, anxious and curious, and the shamans painted these visions on rock. The figures took on godlike status, beings who came from beyond the horizon. Whether real encounters, hallucinations, or stories woven in trance, they left behind an image that resonates across time. Some researchers suggest that altered states of consciousness, achieved through fasting, drumming, or plants, produced visions of beings that felt utterly foreign. To the human brain, these visions might manifest as figures with large eyes, glowing bodies, or radiant forms. If true, then cave paintings were the first visual records of the inner landscape of the mind. Yet how curious it is that the same forms resemble the beings modern people describe in UFO encounters. The grey aliens with large heads and black eyes echo the Wangina of Australia and the figures of the Tassili caves. Is this coincidence, or does it point to something deeper in the human psyche, something shared across the ages of contact? The more we look, the more questions arise. Why are so many ancient sites aligned with the stars? Why did early humans care so much about constellations and celestial movements? Was it only for navigation and agriculture? Or did they feel a connection with beings who came from those places? The carvings and paintings do not answer directly, but they hint, they whisper, they invite us to wonder. And so as we drift into this first chapter of our journey through aliens in history, we linger in the darkness of caves lit by fire. We imagine the crackling of flames, the scent of smoke, the sound of tools scraping against stone. We imagine the silence of night when the fire dies down and only the stars remain. Somewhere among those stars, perhaps someone was watching them, just as they watched the sky. The marks they left on stone remain, waiting for us to look and ask the same question they must have asked long ago. Who is out there? This is the beginning of the story, the place where human imagination and the mystery of the skies first meet. From here, the path leads forward into Sumer, Egypt, India, Greece, Rome, and all the ages that followed, carrying the same wonder, the same curiosity, the same question echoing softly through history. Picture the land between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. The soil here is rich, dark, and fertile. The rivers flood, leaving behind mud that can be shaped into bricks, canals that can be dug into irrigation, and fields that can grow more grain than a wandering hunter could ever imagine. This is Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, and here the first true cities of the world began to rise. Temples climbed upward in terraces of mud brick. Ziggurats towered over the flat plains like mountains built by human hands. And in this strange new age, when writing itself was first invented, people carved into clay tablets stories that would echo for thousands of years. Among those stories is one of the oldest and most puzzling in all of human history. The Sumerians spoke of beings called the Anunnaki. They were not ordinary gods who lived in the forests or mountains. They were not spirits of water or wind. They came, the stories say, from the sky. They descended to earth, bringing with them knowledge, laws, and order. They gave humankind the skills to farm, to build, to measure, and to rule. And then, in many versions of the tales, they left again, retreating to the heavens from which they had come. To understand the mystery of the Anunnaki, you have to picture a Sumerian city at its height. Imagine Uruk with its high walls, bustling markets, and sacred temples. Priests chant in courtyards, farmers bring grain and animals, and in the temple at the center of the city, scribes press sharpened reeds into clay, recording not only trade but also the great myths. They write of Enki, the god of wisdom and water, who shaped humanity out of clay. They write of Enlil, lord of the sky, who gave kings the right to rule. They write of Anu, the father of gods, who dwelled far above in the highest heavens. And scattered throughout these stories are references to the Anunnaki, the princes of heaven, or those who came down. What strikes us now is how different the Anunnaki appear compared to other deities. They are described as descending from above, bestowing knowledge, and even mingling with humans to create rulers of special bloodlines. This was not simply myth for entertainment. To the Sumerians, it explained why their civilization, so advanced compared to the wandering tribes around them, seemed chosen. They had contact with beings who were greater than men. Here lies the suspense. Were these simply imagined gods, products of a fertile culture inventing divine patrons for their rulers? Or were the Sumerians writing down, in the only language they had, real encounters with beings they did not understand? Beings who came from the sky, who appeared suddenly, and who carried knowledge that seemed beyond the reach of ordinary humans. Think of it this way. The Sumerians invented the wheel, writing, complex irrigation systems, astronomy, and advanced mathematics. They mapped the stars with a precision that astonishes scholars today. On their tablets are records of the planets, including Uranus and Neptune, which cannot be seen with the naked eye. How did they know? Was it the patient observation of countless generations, or was there, as some suggest, another source of information? The Anunnaki, the ancient visitors, are the tantalizing answer that hovers just out of reach. One of the most compelling myths is that of the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the great king, said to be 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, seeks eternal life. Gilgamesh himself was believed to be of semi-divine descent, perhaps the child of mingling between humans and the gods. This mixing of bloodlines was not unique to Sumer. It echoes through cultures worldwide, from demigods in Greece to sons of heaven in China. But in the Sumerian version, it is closely tied to the Anunnaki. Did these stories preserve a memory of interbreeding between humans and other beings, whether divine, extraterrestrial, or symbolic? Or was it simply a way for rulers to claim authority by saying they were not entirely of this world? Let us imagine a night in ancient yore. The ziggurat of the moon god Nana rises into the sky, its steps climbing higher and higher toward the heavens. At the top, priests burn offerings and chant to the gods. But below, in the houses of mud brick, ordinary people whisper of the Anunnaki. They tell their children that long ago, the gods came down and taught men how to live. They describe shining beings, radiant and powerful, who came not from the earth but from the stars. The children listen wide-eyed, much like children in caves thousands of years earlier. The pattern continues. Humans look upward, see something strange, and build stories around it. The clay tablets provide hints but never clarity. In the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, built on older Sumerian myths, the gods come from a chaotic realm before Earth was formed. They shape the world, establish order, and create humanity to serve them. It is a strained relationship. The gods demand labor, food, and worship, as though humanity was made as servants. For some modern interpreters, this detail seems eerily like the way advanced beings might use a primitive species. Were humans, in this telling, created or altered by the Anunnaki to perform work, to maintain cities, to farm the land? The idea is speculative, controversial, and unsettling. Yet the tablets do not silence it. What deepens the mystery is that the Sumerians themselves were not vague in their astronomy. They knew of the planets in a way that seems impossible without telescopes. They described the solar system as a series of orbits, and in some interpretations, they even mentioned a 12th planet what some modern authors call Nibiru. This planet, they say, was the home of the Anunnaki. Every few thousand years, it drew close to Earth, and each time, its inhabitants could make contact. Again, scholars argue that these readings are modern distortions, but if even a fraction of it were true, the implications are astonishing. Imagine if you lived in that world, a farmer working the fields near Uruk. You look up and see a bright star moving strangely. You hear stories from priests that the gods descend from that star. You hear rulers claim they are chosen by the Anunnaki, their blood mixed with beings of the sky. Would you doubt, or would you believe, as the entire city believes, that your gods came from beyond? The suspense of the Anunnaki lies not in what we know, but in what we cannot prove. The tablets are real, the myths are written, the knowledge of the Sumerians is undeniable. Yet the leap from gods to aliens is one step beyond certainty. Still, the question lingers in every retelling. Could the dawn of civilization itself have been touched, guided, or even accelerated by beings who are not entirely human? Some say that the Sumerian myths are simply metaphors, that the Anunnaki represent natural forces, personifications of the sky, the rivers, the winds, but others point to the detail, the consistency, and the strangeness of their stories. They did not just describe beings of light, but beings with purpose, knowledge, and intention. They taught laws, gave agriculture, divided lands, and instructed kings. These are not the chaotic gods of other mythologies. These are organizers, planners, givers of knowledge, which makes the idea of extraterrestrial visitors, however incredible, all the more difficult to dismiss. Think of how different the world would look if the story of the Anunnaki were taken literally. Humanity might not be the sole author of civilization. Our earliest steps into writing, law, and mathematics might have been guided by hands not our own. Our rulers might have claimed their authority, not from divine invention, but from literal contact with beings of the sky. It casts the entire history of humanity in a different light. And yet, we return to the suspense of silence. The tablets do not explain themselves. The ziggurats lie in ruins, the cities buried under sand. The voices of the priests are gone. We are left only with fragments, half-broken myths, and the haunting name of the Anunnaki. Were they gods, aliens, or symbols of imagination? No answer comes. Only the enduring mystery remains. As you drift with this story, imagine the plains of Mesopotamia at night. The rivers glimmer under the moon. The ziggurat rises in darkness. Above, the stars blaze, thousands upon thousands of points of light. Somewhere among them, the Sumerians believed, was the home of the Anunnaki. Perhaps they still look down, as they once did, watching silently, waiting for the time to return. The desert at night is vast and silent. The sand stretches endlessly in every direction, pale under the moonlight, whispering with the wind. In the distance, three immense shapes rise against the horizon. They are pyramids, monumental and immovable, their stones stacked higher than any mountain our ancestors had ever dared to build. At their base lies the Sphinx, half lion, half human, staring out toward eternity. This is ancient Egypt, a civilization that seemed to dream in stone, reaching not only across the land, but upward, always upward, to the sky. Egypt has always been a place of mystery, a land where the living and the dead, the earthly and the divine, were never truly separate. To the ancient Egyptians, the sky was not just a ceiling of stars. It was a realm of gods, of journeys, of rebirth, and woven into their myths, their temples, their very architecture, is the suspicion that they were not only looking up to the heavens, but perhaps also waiting for something or someone to return from them. The gods of Egypt were many, and most were tied to the stars. Osiris, the god of resurrection, was linked to Orion. His soul was believed to dwell in that constellation, guiding the dead as they journeyed into the afterlife. Isis, his wife, was connected with Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. Each year when Sirius rose before dawn, the Nile flooded, bringing life to the land. This was not coincidence to the Egyptians. It was a message, a sign from the heavens that life itself was governed by forces beyond the earth. And so, when they built their pyramids, they aligned them not randomly but precisely with these stars. The shafts inside the Great Pyramid point directly toward Orion and Sirius, as though the pyramid itself were a cosmic instrument, a stairway not just to the sky but to specific destinations among the stars. Why would they go to such lengths, unless they believed their gods were truly out there, watching, waiting, perhaps guiding? The Great Pyramid itself is one of history's most enduring puzzles. Its stones weigh tons, yet they are fitted so precisely that a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. Its base is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points of the Earth. Its proportions contain mathematical constants, even the value of pi, encoded in stone thousands of years before Greek mathematicians wrote them down. To many, these are signs of incredible human ingenuity. To others, they suggest something stranger, that the Egyptians had knowledge they should not have possessed, knowledge given to them by someone else, someone who came from the stars. Imagine for a moment what it must have been like to live in Egypt during the Old Kingdom, when the pyramids were still bright and white, covered with polished limestone that reflected the sun by day and the moon by night. To approach them would have been to approach mountains of light. The priests spoke of gods who descended in golden boats, shining crafts that came from the sky. They told of Thoth, the god of wisdom, who gave writing and knowledge to humankind. They told of Ra, who traveled across the heavens each day in a solar bark, only to descend into the underworld at night, battling serpents before rising again. Were these just stories, or were the echoes of something seen, something remembered? Long ago, craft that shone like the sun, beings who brought knowledge, beings who descended and ascended, as if by design. In Egyptian temples, carvings show gods holding objects that look uncannily technological. Some images appear to show bulbs, wires, or vessels unlike anything in their time. Scholars explain these as symbols, metaphors for power or life. But to modern eyes, they raise questions. Were the Egyptians simply dreaming of tools they had never seen? Or were they recording glimpses of things left behind by visitors? Tools and crafts that to them were indistinguishable from magic. The story of Osiris is one of the most haunting. He was said to have ruled as a wise king before being murdered by his brother Set. His body was cut apart and scattered, only for Isis to gather him, reassemble him, and restore him. Osiris then became the ruler of the afterlife, eternally reborn among the stars of Orion. To the Egyptians, this myth was more than story. It was a map of the cosmos, a promise that death was not the end. But think of it another way. Imagine a being who came from the stars, lived among men, and then returned to the heavens after death. How would such a figure be remembered? Perhaps not as an alien, for they had no word for that. Perhaps only as a god. The mystery deepens when we consider the Sphinx. Carved from bedrock, it stares eternally eastward, toward the rising sun. Its body is a lion, symbol of strength, and its face is human, symbol of wisdom. Yet erosion patterns suggest it may be far older than the pyramids, perhaps built in an age when Egypt was greener, when rains fell on the desert. If true, then the Sphinx predates the known history of Egypt itself. Who carved it? Why? And why align it with the stars? Some theories suggest it once marked a time when celestial visitors walked the earth, guardians from above, their memory preserved in stone. Let us linger here, in imagination. Night falls over the Giza Plateau. The desert is quiet, the pyramids rising like black silhouettes against a sky filled with countless stars. A group of priests climb the steps of a temple, their torches flickering. They look up, chanting to Orion, to Sirius, to the gods who live in the heavens. And as the stars shimmer, perhaps they believe, truly believe, that the gods are listening. Perhaps they even believe the gods will one day return. We know the Egyptians practiced rituals of rebirth and resurrection. The pharaohs were mummified, their tombs filled with treasures, their bodies preserved for eternity. Why go to such lengths, unless they believed the dead would travel somewhere beyond Earth, somewhere among the stars? The texts say it plainly. The king is reborn in the sky, joining the gods in Orion. The tomb is not a grave. It is a launch, a passage, a vehicle for a journey beyond. It is hard not to hear in these words the faint echo of something more than religion, something like memory. Of course, scholars tell us the Egyptians were symbolic. The pyramids were not starships but monuments. The gods were not visitors but ideas, expressions of human hope and fear. And yet, the alignment of monuments with specific constellations, the precision of their astronomical knowledge, and the persistence of their myths leave us unsettled. They leave us with the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, the Egyptians were trying to tell us something they themselves only half understood. The suspense lies in what is missing. No papyrus explains outright that aliens came. No carving shows a ship descending in detail. Instead, there are hints, fragments, whispers, a shaft pointing toward Orion, a god who sails in a shining boat, a myth of a king who comes from the stars and returns there. They are like puzzle pieces without the full picture, a story half buried in sand. Think of standing before the Great Pyramid now, in the stillness of night. The air is cool, the desert quiet. You tilt your head back and see the stars above, the same stars the Egyptians saw thousands of years ago. Orion gleams in the sky, his belt perfectly aligned with the pyramids below. Did they build them this way for beauty, for religion, or for a reason we no longer remember? Were they calling to someone, signaling across space, leaving a mark not only for eternity, but for those who might return? It is easy to dismiss these questions as fantasy. And yet, fantasy has a way of outlasting certainty. The pyramids stand when almost everything else has fallen. The myths endure when the kings are dust. And in those myths, in those stones, in those alignments, the Egyptians have left us a riddle. Were they the dreamers of gods or the students of visitors? As you close your eyes and drift, let yourself imagine that night in Egypt long ago, a priest raising his arms to the heavens, chanting to Sirius as it rose, a pharaoh entombed, waiting for rebirth among the stars, a civilization that looked upward, always upward, as if they knew the sky was not empty. If the Sumerians whispered of gods who descended, then the Egyptians built monuments to guide them back. Perhaps, in their hearts, they were waiting for the stars to answer. The air in India is thick with memory. The heat, the dust, the smell of incense rising from temple courtyards, all of it carries whispers of a past that feels impossibly deep. A past where gods once walked among men. Unlike the ruins of Mesopotamia or the silent stones of Egypt, India's memory is alive in its texts. For thousands of years, words have been carried forward, copied, retold, recited in chants. And within those words are stories so strange, so vivid, that one cannot help but wonder whether they describe imagination or memory of something real. The stories speak of vimanas, flying palaces, chariots of the gods, vehicles that could rise into the sky, cross continents, and even travel between worlds. The Sanskrit epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, describe them not as myths in vague metaphor, but as machines-crafted objects, with detail so striking that it leaves us unsettled. Were the people of ancient India telling stories of divine magic, or recording something they once saw with their own eyes? Let us begin with the Ramayana. It tells of Rama, the prince who battled demons and crossed the seas. In its pages we find mention of the Pushpaka Vimana, a flying craft once belonging to the god of wealth, but taken by Ravana, the demon king of Lanka. The text does not describe it as a winged bird or a floating cloud, but as a great aerial chariot. It was said to be adorned like a palace, able to carry many passengers, to fly at will wherever commanded. Imagine, in a world of ox carts and wooden boats, a shining palace that could rise into the heavens at the touch of a thought. The Mahabharata goes further still. In its sprawling verses are accounts of battles fought not only with swords and arrows, but with weapons that seem terrifyingly modern. It speaks of celestial missiles that shone like the sun, weapons that unleashed firestorms and winds capable of leveling entire armies. In one passage, a weapon is described that scorched the earth, leaving corpses unrecognizable, their hair and nails falling away. The rivers boiled, the birds turned white, and the survivors threw themselves into water to escape the burning heat. It is an image chillingly close to what we know of nuclear devastation. Yet this story is thousands of years old. Could these be exaggerations, poetic visions of lightning and storm? Or were the ancient authors recording, in the only language they knew, something else, machines of power, weapons of destruction, brought by beings who came from the sky? In other Sanskrit texts, the descriptions of Vimanas are strangely technical. The Samarangana Sutradhara medieval compilation drawing on older traditions details the construction of flying machines. It speaks of strong and durable bodies, engines fueled by mercury, and methods of rising and maneuvering in the sky. It describes switches, levers, and flames shooting downward to propel the craft. These are not the words of vague myth. They read almost like instructions, as though someone once witnessed or inherited knowledge of machines far beyond their time. Picture it, a clear Indian sky thousands of years ago, the monsoon clouds parting, the sun pouring over forests and rivers. Then, in that silence, a shining craft rises, wheels turning, flames hissing, a palace in the air. To the farmers below, it would have been a miracle, a vision of God's descending. But to us, it sounds eerily like technology, an echo of engines, of machines we only rediscovered in our own age. And it is not just the machines, but the beings who flew them. The texts speak of devas, radiant ones, who moved between heaven and earth. They fought great wars against the asuras, the dark beings, with vimanas as their chariots of battle. These were not distant gods who lived only in myth. They were described as rulers, commanders, engineers of weapons, masters of flight. To those who saw them, there was no word for alien. There was only the word God. But let us slow down and sit with one of these stories. In the Mahabharata, there is the account of Arjuna, the warrior prince, who is taken into the heavens. He is lifted up in a shining craft, where he meets Indra, the king of the gods. There he sees divine cities, filled with splendor, beings radiant with light, and weapons of unimaginable power. Was this a vision, a mystical dream? Or was Arjuna taken aboard a craft, shown a realm beyond his world, much as an astronaut might describe seeing Earth from orbit? The suspense grows when we consider how carefully these stories were preserved. The Indian tradition was not casual with words. The epics were memorized and recited for centuries, every verse guarded, every syllable preserved. If the Vimanas were only poetic invention, why describe their mechanisms, their fuels, their capacities in such detail? Why speak of aerial battles, of cities floating in the sky, of weapons that scarred the earth with fire? Skeptics will say these are metaphors, grand visions to inspire awe, and yet, when we read the lines carefully, when we compare them with what we know of modern machines, the possibility grows harder to dismiss. Perhaps the ancients were not imagining but remembering echoes of encounters so far beyond their world that only the language of gods and demons could contain them. Think of standing in an Indian temple today, the stone pillars carved with figures of gods riding strange vehicles, incense coils in the air, chants rise, bells ring. You look up at the carvings and see gods soaring above clouds, wielding shining weapons. You hear the stories of Rama and Ravana, of Arjuna and Indra, of celestial wars fought in the heavens, and you cannot help but wonder, were these stories only symbols of human struggle or faint, distorted memories of visitors from the stars? The mystery is not just in the stories themselves, but in the consistency. Across centuries, across different texts, the Vimanas are described again and again, always as flying machines, always as vehicles of gods, always with the same blend of majesty and technology. Myths often shift, evolve, grow inconsistent, but here the pattern holds. A vehicle, a craft, a palace that flies. Close your eyes and imagine. You are a villager in ancient India, the night air thick with the smell of wood smoke. Above, the stars burn bright. Then, without warning, a light appears, brighter than the moon. A sound fills the air, a roar like thunder. And then you see it, a shining craft, vast, luminous, descending. Figures emerge, radiant, armored, wielding weapons of light. To you, it is not a machine, it is a god. You fall to your knees, certain you are in the presence of the divine. That image has power, power enough to last thousands of years, to be recited again and again until it became scripture. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was not only an image, perhaps it was an event. As with Sumer in Egypt, we are left with fragments. No Vimanas sit in museums, no engines fueled by mercury rest in ruins. Only words, carved into palm leaves and stone, passed through centuries, yet the words are stubborn. They will not fade. They speak of machines that should not exist, of wars that sound too much like modern devastation, of beings who came from the sky and gave knowledge to humankind. So what do we make of it? Were the Vimanas symbols of human imagination, visions of divine power clothed in the language of machines? Or were they memories of real craft, real visitors, remembered imperfectly by a people who could only describe them as gods? The texts never answer. They only leave us with images. A palace rising into the air, a weapon that burns like the sun, a god descending in a shining craft. They are pieces of a riddle, one we may never solve. And yet, the suspense lingers. Because if the stories are true in part, then the sky above us is not empty. It is a path, a highway once traveled, perhaps waiting to be traveled again. As you drift toward sleep, imagine the hum of an ancient engine, the gleam of a shining craft against the Indian sky. Imagine the awe of those who looked up and saw their gods descend. And then imagine, just for a moment, that what they saw was not a dream. The Mediterranean is a cradle of stories. The sea itself seems to hold them in its waves, carrying whispers from island to island, from mountain to shore. When we think of ancient Greece, we think of temples gleaming in the sun, of marble columns, of philosophers arguing in shaded courtyards. But beneath that image lies something stranger. Greece was not just a birthplace of democracy and theatre. It was also a land where gods walked among men, where thunderbolts split the sky, and where heroes met beings who were anything but human. The Greeks believed their gods lived on Mount Olympus. High, unreachable, veiled in mist, Olympus was no ordinary mountain. From its summit, Zeus hurled lightning across the world. Hera watched with piercing eyes. Apollo drove his shining chariot of the sun across the heavens. The gods were not distant abstractions. They were characters in the daily lives of people. They quarreled, loved, punished, and rewarded. They appeared in disguise. They interfered in battles. They left behind children who were half divine and half human. For a society that built its strength on logic, mathematics, and reason, this belief seems strange. Unless, of course, the gods were not only myths, but memories of something real. Let us look at Zeus, the king of the gods, wielder of thunderbolts, master of the sky. The myths describe his weapon as a bolt of blazing energy, hurled down upon his enemies. It crackled, it destroyed, it left nothing standing. To us, it sounds like a thunderstorm, but to a modern ear, it can also sound like a directed weapon, a javelin of lightning wielded with precision. If Zeus was only a myth, why did the stories linger on this weapon so clearly, so vividly, again and again? And what of Apollo? He drove a chariot that carried the sun across the sky. Each day, without fail, he rose from the east and traveled to the west, his shining horses blazing with fire. For the Greeks, this explained the cycle of the sun. But if we strip away the poetry, what remains? A craft of fire, a vehicle in the heavens that moved with order and brilliance. Could the chariot of the sun have been a machine of light, something seen from afar and woven into myth? The suspicion grows stronger when we read the stories of heroes like Perseus or Bellerophon. Perseus received weapons from the gods, a sword that could cut through anything, sandals that let him fly, and a polished shield that showed him the reflection of Medusa. These were gifts from beings far beyond ordinary men. To us, they sound like magical tools. To another ear, they sound like advanced technology, jet-like sandals, a reflective visor, a blade of unearthly sharpness. Perseus's journey reads like the tale of a man equipped by higher beings for a dangerous mission. Then there is Bellerophon. His story is even stranger. He rode Pegasus, a winged horse, into the skies. On Pegasus's back, he soared toward Olympus itself, trying to reach the gods. The myth says he fell, punished for his arrogance. But what is Pegasus, really? A flying creature of imagination, or a symbol for something else, a craft, perhaps, described as a horse by a people who had no other frame of reference? The myths of Greece are filled with beings who descend from the sky. Hermes, with his winged sandals and his staff that glowed with power, moved between worlds as easily as a messenger between towns. Athena appeared suddenly, radiant in armor, bringing wisdom and warcraft. Dionysus arrived from foreign lands with powers that baffled mortals. Again and again, these figures are not imagined at a distance. They interact, they intervene, they leave footprints in the human world. They are not shadows in the clouds. They are present, tangible, commanding. And then we come to the strangest detail of all. The Greeks did not see their gods as all-powerful. They were not infinite, untouchable forces. They had flaws. They made mistakes. They loved. They lusted. They quarreled. They grew jealous. They seemed almost human, yet greater. This is unusual. Most mythologies elevate their gods to perfection, distant and pure. But in Greece, the gods were fallible. They lived in bodies. They ate ambrosia. They drank nectar. They could be wounded. They could even die. Does this not sound like beings of flesh and blood, elevated in power, but not truly eternal? Could it be that the gods of Greece were visitors from elsewhere, mistaken for immortals but bound by limits? Now let us imagine, slowly, one of these encounters. Picture a shepherd on the hills of Attica. The night is quiet. The sheep are asleep. He looks up at the stars. Then, a light appears. At first, it looks like a star, but it grows brighter, moving across the sky. It descends, glowing with fire. The shepherd shields his eyes. When the glow fades, he sees a figure standing before him, radiant, tall, clad in shining armor. The figure speaks in a voice that trembles the earth. To the shepherd, this is a god. To us, reading across the centuries, it might be something else, a traveler from another world, arriving in a craft of light. The myths are full of these sudden appearances. The gods arrive in blazing glory, or hidden in disguise. They give gifts. They issue commands. They bear children with mortals. What are we to make of this? Are these stories of imagination only, or echoes of ancient contact with beings from the sky? And consider the architecture of Greece. Temples aligned with celestial events. Structures designed to honor the gods in ways that connected them with the stars. The Parthenon itself stands as a monument to Athena, a goddess said to have appeared in Athens and chosen it as her city. The Greeks built in stone what they saw in the sky, anchoring heaven to earth. Some scholars suggest the gods were metaphors for natural forces. Zeus for thunder, Poseidon for the sea, Apollo for the sun, and this may be true. Yet the myths resist such simplification. They insist on detail, on character, on story. They tell of journeys, of machines, of weapons, of encounters. Too vivid to be only metaphor, too strange to be only invention. Let us return to Mount Olympus, that mist-shrouded peak. To the Greeks it was unreachable, veiled, forbidden, the home of the gods. But what if it was not the mountain itself, but what was above it? A craft, perhaps hidden in clouds, descending only when it wished. To those below, the gods seemed to live on the mountain. In truth, they may have lived in the sky. The suspense deepens when we realize how much of Western imagination grew from these myths. Our ideas of gods, of heroes, of the very structure of myth, are shaped by Greece. If Greece's gods were born from encounters with something real, then the roots of our culture are not just human, they are touched by the stars. Picture the great poet Homer reciting the Iliad. He speaks of Athena descending in armor to guide Achilles. He speaks of Apollo bringing plague with his arrows of light. His audience listens, eyes wide, believing. But what if Homer was not only telling myth? What if he was preserving memory? Memory of a time when beings from beyond the world intervened in human affairs. The line between myth and history blurs. The stories are too consistent, too vivid. The gods walk among men. They wield strange weapons. They fly in chariots of fire. They live, not in heaven beyond reach, but close enough to touch. And so we linger with the Greeks. On the shores of the Aegean, under the blinding sun, we sit in the theater, listening to plays that retell the quarrels of gods. We climb the steps of temples, offering sacrifices to figures who once descended from the sky. We wonder, as they once wondered, who were these beings, really? As the night deepens, and the waves of the Aegean lap softly against the shore, the question hangs in the air. Were the gods of Greece creations of human imagination, or memories of ancient visitors who walked among us? We cannot say, but the possibility leaves us restless. If they were real, then the line between history and myth is far thinner than we ever thought. The Roman Empire prided itself on order. Roads stretched like veins across the land. Aqueducts carried water for miles. Legions marched with precision. Yet beneath all this discipline lay a deep superstition. The Romans believed their world was filled with signs that foretold the will of the gods. No decision of state, no battle, no coronation went forward without augurs reading the sky, the flight of birds, or the flicker of lightning. To Rome, the heavens were never empty. They were a stage where messages were written, and sometimes those messages were strange. Roman historians, practical men who recorded wars and laws, also noted unusual events in the sky. Their words were not poetry but reports, observations meant for the record. And among them we find accounts that sound unnervingly like encounters with the unknown. Take the writings of Livy, the great historian. In his Ab Herb Condita, he describes prodigies seen over Rome, shields blazing in the sky, phantom fleets of ships gliding above the clouds, mysterious lights that lingered far longer than shooting stars. On one occasion, a great noise shook the heavens. followed by what appeared to be a burning torch descending. These were not framed as myths. They were catalogued alongside eclipses and earthquakes, omens to be taken seriously by the Senate. Another Roman writer, Pliny the Elder, compiled wonders of nature in his natural history. Among them, he mentioned sky apparitions, round shields, glowing orbs, lights darting across the firmament. The words sound eerily familiar. When modern people describe UFOs, they speak of disks, spheres, glowing objects that defy explanation. Pliny was not trying to invent science fiction. He was listing phenomena observed in his time, strange enough to deserve a place in his encyclopedia of the world. Then there is the chilling account of Julius Obsequens, who compiled prodigies from earlier Roman records. He wrote of a time when, above Arpi in Apulia, round shields were seen in the sky. At other times, globes of fire appeared, and even humanoid figures were reported walking among the clouds. Imagine a Roman farmer standing in his field, looking up to see not just stars but glowing orbs, shields of light drifting silently. To him, these were portents of divine judgment. To us, they sound uncannily like alien craft. One of the most mysterious reports comes from 214 BCE. During the Second Punic War, in Hadria, it was said that an altar was seen in the sky with figures in white robes standing around it. An altar, floating above the earth, with beings gathered in ritual. Was this vision born of fear in wartime, or was it a glimpse of something beyond comprehension? If a modern witness claimed to see a glowing platform in the sky with beings upon it, we would call it a close encounter. The Romans called it a prodigy. Let us pause and imagine one of these nights. A Roman soldier keeps watch on the walls of a frontier outpost. The stars are clear, the night calm. Suddenly, a light appears above him, brighter than any torch, moving without sound. It hovers, shifts, then glides away across the horizon. He grips his spear, heart pounding. To him, it is a sign from the gods, a warning or a blessing. He reports it to his commander, who passes it to the priests, who consult the augurs. By morning, the Senate in Rome is informed. A ritual is performed, sacrifice is offered, to appease whatever power had written its message in the sky. The Romans did not separate the divine from the practical. To them, strange lights above the city were not curiosities, they were politics. They meant the gods were watching, perhaps displeased, perhaps demanding action. Decisions of war and peace could be swayed by what was seen above the forum or on the battlefields of Gaul. The empire's destiny was, in a sense, tied to the skies. What makes these accounts so haunting is how matter-of-fact they are. Unlike the myths of Greece, filled with characters and narrative, the Roman records are sparse. They do not tell stories. They report events. A shield of fire was seen. A globe of light appeared. An altar hovered in the sky. These are not embellished tales. They read like official logs, observations that puzzled even the pragmatic Romans. We might ask whether these were natural phenomena. Could the shields of fire have been meteors, the globes of light comets, or auroras? Perhaps, yet many descriptions do not fit. A meteor streaks and vanishes in seconds, but the Romans described objects that hovered, moved deliberately, even interacted with the clouds. The precision of their words makes us wonder. Were they recording contact, masked in the only language they knew? There is also the famous story from 74 BCE, near the town of Splicium. A Roman army, preparing for battle, looked up and saw a massive object in the sky. Plutarch wrote that it resembled a great flaming silver shield, descending between the two armies. Terrified, both sides withdrew. Here we see not only description, but impact. Whatever was in the sky, it stopped a battle. Soldiers, hardened men of discipline, stood in awe and fear. What was it that appeared above them? A natural event, or something else, intervening in human conflict? The Romans believed the gods often chose sides in war. Jupiter favored Rome, Mars gave strength, Venus offered protection. Yet what if the gods who intervened were not divine abstractions, but beings who could appear when they chose? Their machines mistaken for heavenly omens. A silver shield halting an army sounds less like divine wrath and more like technology beyond Roman understanding. As we sit with these accounts, a strange pattern emerges. From Sumer to Egypt, from India to Greece, and now in Rome, the stories repeat. Beings in the sky, vehicles of light, weapons of fire, encounters recorded not as fantasies, but as memories. The names change: Nunaki Devas, Olympians, gods of Romba. The theme remains: someone was watching. Someone was here. Picture the city of Rome itself, the heart of the empire. Night falls, the streets quiet. In the Forum, torches flicker. Suddenly, a glow lights the sky above the Capitoline Hill. Citizens gather, pointing upward, whispering prayers. A glowing disk hovers, then vanishes as quickly as it came. To the Romans, this is Jupiter reminding them of his power. To us, it is a report that feels uncomfortably modern. The suspense grows because these accounts are not isolated. They appear again and again across centuries. The Roman world was disciplined, skeptical, practical, yet even they could not ignore what was above them. They catalogued it, feared it, worshipped it, and in doing so, they left us clues that whisper of contact. Were the omens of Rome divine visions, or were they glimpses of visitors from the stars? We cannot say, but the possibility lingers like smoke above a dying fire. The empire that ruled the known world still bowed its head to the mysteries of the sky. As we close this segment, imagine yourself as a Roman citizen. You stand in the Forum, the marble columns gleaming in moonlight. You look up, and there it is, a blazing shield, silent, hovering, vast. The crowd gasps. Priests hurry forward with sacrifices. The Senate debates. You feel awe, fear, wonder. You call it the will of Jupiter, but perhaps, just perhaps, you have witnessed something far stranger. The Middle Ages are often imagined as a time of faith and shadow, of castles and cathedrals rising against stormy skies, of monks bent over manuscripts by candlelight. It was a world where every event, from a good harvest to a sudden plague, was seen as the hand of God. Yet even in this age of unquestioning devotion, strange lights appeared in the skies. Reports were whispered of beings not quite human, and records quietly captured moments that do not fit neatly within the story of church and crown. Unlike the Greeks or Romans, medieval people did not speak openly of gods descending from the heavens in radiant machines. The church was the supreme interpreter of the cosmos, and anything outside its framework of angels, demons, and miracles was dangerous. To suggest that there were beings beyond heaven and hell risked charges of heresy, yet human eyes are always watching, and human memory is stubborn. The sky still spoke, people still saw, and some dared to write it down. One of the most striking reports comes from England in 1290. In the Yorkshire village of Byland, a group of monks were gathered when they saw, high above the abbey, a large silvery disc floating silently. It glided across the sky before vanishing into the distance. This was recorded in a chronicle, not as fantasy, but as fact. The words are simple, almost clinical. A round silver thing, like a disc, flew slowly over them and excited the greatest terror. A medieval UFO, described centuries before the modern term existed. Another record comes from Nuremberg, Germany, in 1561. Though technically at the dawn of the Renaissance, the mindset was still medieval, and the account is chilling. Citizens awoke to see the sky filled with object spheres, cylinders, and crosses engaged in what appeared to be a great aerial battle. The woodcut printed afterward shows shapes colliding, beams of light flashing, and strange crafts tumbling toward Earth in flames. The witnesses believed they had seen a divine warning, a celestial sign of God's anger. But to our eyes, it looks hauntingly like a dogfight in the sky, machines locked in combat. What power could unleash such a display above a city? But perhaps the most unsettling accounts are the quieter ones, hidden in manuscripts. Monks who saw lights hovering above monasteries, peasants who claimed to be visited in fields, travelers who told of beings in robes of light, stepping out of glowing orbs. Always the descriptions are cloaked in the language of the time. Angels, demons, miracles. But read carefully, and something else emerges. A pattern. Visitors in radiant forms. Machines mistaken for divine chariots. Encounters that left people shaken, awed, confused. The church, of course, was cautious. It tolerated visions if they reinforced its authority. Saints who saw angels were celebrated, but those who reported encounters outside that framework were silenced. Their words remained in margins of manuscripts, in local chronicles, in whispered tales by hearthfire. For the common people, the sky was a source of dread and wonder. To see a strange light was to question the order of creation itself, and so many stayed silent. Yet silence cannot erase memory. In 1235, Japanese records, though outside Europe, still within a medieval mindset, described glowing balls of light dancing in the night sky. The commander, General Yoritsune, ordered his men not to fear them, explaining they were natural phenomena. But the record exists, clear and unembellished. Lights moving in formation, hovering, darting, defying explanation. Even in cultures far apart, the same shapes, the same mysteries appeared. Imagine, if you will, a peasant in 14th century France. His life is bound by the rhythm of the seasons. He tills the soil, fears famine, hears sermons about heaven and hell. One evening, as he walks home beneath the stars, a glow appears above the fields. It is not the moon, not the stars, not fire. It is a sphere of light, silent, hovering. Then, before his eyes, it drifts downward. Figures emerge, clad in shining garments. He falls to his knees, certain he has seen angels. But what if he has seen something else? Something the church has no words for. He will never tell his priest. He will whisper only to his children, who will pass the story as a secret, a warning, a wonder. We must remember that the medieval imagination was not weak. Cathedrals rose like mountains of stone, their stained glass casting cosmic visions across the nave. The sky was mapped with care by monks who studied the heavens, charting stars and eclipses. They were not blind. They recorded what they saw. And so, when strange lights moved against the order of the constellations, they noticed. When glowing objects hovered above towns, they wrote it down. These were not fools lost in superstition. They were observers, bound by the language of faith, but still witnesses to something real. The mystery deepens when we consider how these events were interpreted. Some said they were signs of the end times. Others believed they were battles between angels and demons, carried out above human eyes. Still others saw them as omens, warnings of war, plague, or famine. Always the explanation was framed in the theology of the church. Yet to us, reading centuries later, they sound like descriptions of craft and conflict far beyond medieval technology. And perhaps that is the most haunting part. If beings were visiting Earth in those centuries, what were they doing? Why appear above a monastery in Yorkshire? Why stage an aerial battle above Nuremberg? Were they studying us, as we study tribes uncontacted by modern civilization? Were they fighting among themselves, oblivious to human eyes below? Or were they sending messages, hoping to be seen but not understood, planting seeds of mystery that would grow into our modern questions? Let us picture the Nuremberg sky once more. The townspeople gather, pointing upward. They see spheres colliding, rods shooting across the heavens, crosses of light breaking apart. Some objects fall, smoking, as though machines have been destroyed. The crowd trembles. Priests call for repentance. To the citizens, it is a divine sign, a warning from God. To us, it is one of the clearest descriptions of a UFO battle in history. Machines fighting above a city, recorded not in fiction, but in a news broadsheet of the time. The church did not forbid these reports outright, but it guided interpretation. Everything must be read as miracle or devilry, and so, the mystery was hidden in plain sight. Angels and demons may have been visitors in disguise, their craft mistaken for heavenly chariots, but the church allowed no third category, no space for beings from other worlds. To believe such a thing was unthinkable, and yet, the reports persisted, quiet, subtle, but there. We, centuries later, inherit these fragments. We read the chronicles, the woodcuts, the marginal notes. We see patterns the medieval mind could not admit. The same discs, spheres, battles, and beings that appear in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, Greece, and Rome appear again in the Middle Ages. The story does not stop. It continues, whispered under the watchful silence of the church. And so, as you drift deeper into this chapter, imagine the hush of a monastery at night. The chant of monks fades. The candles gutter. Outside, above the cloister, a light appears, silent, radiant, gliding across the sky. A monk looks up, heart trembling. He whispers a prayer, unsure whether he has seen an angel, a demon, or something beyond both. His words will be cautious, written in a margin, hidden in a chronicle. But centuries later, we read them, and we asked the same question he dared not voice. Who was really visiting in the night sky? The Renaissance is often remembered as an explosion of art, science, and human achievement. Paintings glowed with realism, architecture soared to new heights, and the world seemed to expand with every discovery. People began to question, to observe, to measure. Yet amid the brilliant minds of the age, the sky remained a canvas of mystery, a realm where the unknown still moved with silent purpose. Even as men studied the heavens with telescopes and compasses, lights and shapes appeared that defied explanation, haunting observers who were becoming accustomed to reason and measurement. Consider Leonardo da Vinci, the mind that sketched flying machines, mechanisms, and instruments centuries ahead of his time. His notebooks are filled with diagrams of contraptions that could rise into the air, rotate, and navigate. Some of these designs were never built, some seem impractical. But what if they were inspired, not just by imagination, but by memory, by something seen in the sky? Something that defied comprehension, something that whispered of possibilities far beyond Earth. Across Europe, chroniclers recorded strange events in the sky. In 1566, Nuremberg again becomes the center of an unusual sighting. Citizens reported seeing spheres, cylinders, and crosses moving in formation, performing aerial maneuvers that looked deliberate, almost like a battle or display. Witnesses drew woodcuts, preserving the scene in haunting detail. It was as though the heavens themselves had become a theater, and humanity had been given a fleeting, terrifying glimpse of a performance not meant for them. The Renaissance was a period of rediscovery. Knowledge from Greece, Rome, and the East flowed into Europe. People studied ancient texts, including the writings of Plato, Pythagoras, and others who spoke of celestial beings and divine machinery. Scholars began to notice patterns, objects moving in the sky, orbs of light, figures in radiant garments. They were trained observers, yet they struggled to interpret what they saw within the frameworks available to them. The church still held influence, but the thirst for understanding was growing, demanding more than simple explanations of angels or demons. One of the most intriguing aspects of this era is the explosion of maps and charts. Navigators crossed oceans, astronomers charted stars, and mathematicians began to calculate trajectories. Yet among these studies, some chroniclers included notes of odd phenomenalites that moved against the stars, objects that did not follow natural patterns, sudden glows that appeared and disappeared without warning. These were not mere superstition, they were observations, carefully noted, and they persisted across countries and continents, hinting at a presence that humanity could not yet explain. Consider the diary of a Venetian merchant in 1492. He writes of a night when the Adriatic was calm, the stars reflected in the water. Suddenly, a light appeared above the city, hovering silently. He notes its shape, circular, glowing, moving with purpose. It seemed to observe the city, then rise higher and disappear into the darkness. To him, it was a sign of divine favor, perhaps warning. To us, reading centuries later, it is one of many fragments that suggest the sky was never empty, even in an age of logic and reason. Then there is the fascination with flight. Leonardo sketched wings, helicopters, and ornithopters, inspired by birds, yes, but perhaps also by glimpses of craft not of this world. Imagine his mind, studying the skies, observing objects moving with precision beyond human skill. Could these have inspired his designs, planting seeds in his genius that would appear centuries before machines could actually fly? The Renaissance is filled with leaps of imagination, but some of those leaps may have been echoes, memories of visitors who once moved through the heavens. The Renaissance also brought the telescope. Galileo, Kepler, and Tycho Brahe observed the cosmos with unprecedented clarity. Stars, moons, and planets were charted, revealing a universe far vaster than anyone had imagined. And yet, even as science began to explain the heavens, there were phenomena that remained outside understanding. Glowing orbs, strange lights, unidentified movements, reported in diaries, letters, and chronicles continued to confound observers. Even those dedicated to reason could not always find rational explanations. Picture a scholar in Florence, pen in hand, noting the motion of Jupiter through the sky. A light appears, hovering, pulsing, moving deliberately. He records it, unsure whether it is a meteor, an atmospheric phenomenon, or something else entirely. The words are careful, factual, because superstition is no longer the acceptable explanation. Yet even in his logical account, the awe is evident. He senses something extraordinary, something beyond human knowledge, something that might have visited Earth from the stars. The Renaissance fascination with the heavens, coupled with the persistence of these mysterious sightings, created a paradox. Human understanding was growing, yet the universe retained its secrets. Perhaps this tension is why the period feels alive with possibility. The same minds that charted planets also recorded prodigies. The The same artists who painted saints also painted machines and flying devices. The sky became both a laboratory and a mystery, a place where humanity glimpsed the limits of its own understanding and considered the cultural memory. Artists incorporated celestial beings into paintings, often luminous, sometimes mechanical in appearance. Writers included descriptions of bright lights and flying chariots. Scholars copied ancient texts, rediscovering tales of gods, Vimanas, and Olympians. The Renaissance bridged the old and the new. What was once myth now intersected with observation. The stories of ancient visitors were no longer just legend, they were sometimes witness, sometimes memory, sometimes recorded as fact. Imagine, once again, a night in Venice. The canals glisten with moonlight, gondolas drift silently, and the city is alive with the soft murmurs of its citizens. Suddenly, above St. Mark's, a bright disk appears, hovering. A few witnesses, both merchants and scholars, observe its movement. It shifts, rises, and vanishes. They debate its meaning. Was it a miracle, a sign, or a visitor from the stars? The question lingers, unanswered, echoing across time, connecting the Renaissance to every age that saw the skies before it. The suspense of the era lies in its contradictions. Science is emerging, yet the sky retains its wonders. Observation and logic grow, yet so does mystery. Men begin to understand the world, yet something beyond the world remains just out of reach. The Renaissance is a pivot point. Knowledge expands, yet the sky reminds humanity that not all answers are in reach, that perhaps contact with otherworldly beings has always been part of human history. The threads are visible if we look closely. From the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt to the flying Vimanas of India, from Greek gods to Roman sky omens, and now to the Renaissance, a pattern emerges. Beings, craft, lights, and events recur. Each age interprets them differently, yet they persist. The Renaissance, in its fusion of observation and imagination, preserves both the wonder of human innovation and the haunting possibility that humanity is not alone in history. As you drift further into sleep, imagine the Renaissance night sky. Think of Leonardo sketching by candlelight, of scholars in Florence observing the stars, of citizens of Venice gazing at a glowing disk above St. Mark's Square. Somewhere in that sky, perhaps, a visitor watched humanity unfold, as it has for millennia. And though centuries have passed, the echo remains, a whisper in the imagination, a question that refuses to fade. Who has really been watching from above? The oceans of the world have always carried secrets. Waves rise and fall with timeless patience, winds shift without warning, and horizons stretch endlessly, hiding what may be beyond human understanding. In the age of sail, roughly from the 16th to the 18th century, humanity set out to map every shore, claim every island, and cross every sea. Mariners became both explorers and chroniclers, noting not only winds, tides, and currents, but also strange phenomena that appeared far from any known land. It was an era when men looked to the heavens and the horizon with the same sense of awe, when the line between navigation and wonder was often blurred. Ships were slow and fragile by modern standards, and the seas were merciless. Storms could obliterate entire fleets. Sailors' lives were a daily negotiation with the unknown. Yet even amid the fear of natural forces, they recorded lights and objects that defied explanation. Glowing orbs, fiery disks, luminous shapes moving against the stars, these sightings were often dismissed as illusions, as tricks of the eye, or as spirits. Yet the consistency and clarity of the reports are remarkable. Take, for example, the records of Admiral Sir Francis Drake in the late 1500s. On a voyage along the Pacific coast, sailors reported strange lights moving in formation over the water at night. They described shapes that glowed like lanterns, moved without sails or oars, and hovered for hours before disappearing. The admiral himself wrote that while he could not explain the phenomena, he found it significant enough to include in his logs. These were not fanciful tales told in taverns. They were reports made for the record, observations that could not be ignored by men trained to navigate, calculate, and reason. Other accounts appear from the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean, and the South Atlantic. Ships of the Dutch East India Company recorded mysterious fires over the sea, sometimes following their vessels for days. Captains in the Royal Navy wrote of glowing discs rising from the horizon, moving against the wind, and vanishing as suddenly as they appeared. These were recorded in logs alongside practical matters. provisions, winds, enemy ships. The phenomena were real enough to merit attention, yet mysterious enough to resist classification. Consider the reports from the Caribbean in the 17th century. Sailors off the coast of Hispaniola described lights that moved across the sky in coordinated patterns, sometimes descending toward the sea before rising again. Some witnesses claimed to see figures aboard these glowing objects, humanoid forms that appeared radiant, almost angelic, moving with deliberate purpose. Were these visions of divine intervention, as many religious men believed, or something else entirely? Glimpses of beings and machines far beyond human technology. The Age of Sail also saw the rise of explorers who kept meticulous journals, detailing their journeys, discoveries, and the occasional inexplicable encounter. Captain John Smith, famous for his role in early America, recorded fiery globes over the Chesapeake Bay. Dutch navigator Willem Barents noted lights in the sky that moved against the stars, while charting the Arctic seas. These reports were precise, careful, sometimes even skeptical, yet persistent. The sky, even over the most remote oceans, was not empty. One particularly chilling report comes from the Strait of Magellan in 1579. Spanish sailors described a luminous vessel moving silently along the cliffs, far above the water, without wind or visible means of propulsion. It hovered, shifted, and vanished. The men were disciplined, hardened by months at sea, yet they recorded fear, awe, and uncertainty in their journals. To them, this was inexplicable. To us, reading centuries later, it reads like a modern UFO sighting transposed onto wooden ships and stormy seas. The mystery deepens when we realize how these sightings were often interpreted. Sailors were trained in observation, navigation, and record-keeping, but they lived in a world where the supernatural was a constant presence. A glowing orb might be called a spirit, a divine sign, or a warning of approaching danger. Yet the descriptions often carry details that defy such interpretations. Movement against the wind, formation patterns, consistent glowing intensity, sudden disappearance. The reports are not poetic or allegorical. They are precise, factual, and haunting. We must also consider the global spread of these reports. European sailors, traders, and explorers were crossing oceans into regions where indigenous populations had their own traditions of visitors from the sky. In Polynesia, the Maori spoke of glowing canoes and radiant beings descending from the heavens. In the Americas, the Aztecs recorded fiery discs and gods moving through the sky. In Africa, coastal tribes described luminous ships approaching from the horizon, sometimes leaving traces on the water. Across continents, cultures separated by thousands of miles reported similar phenomena. This is not coincidence. Patterns emerged that suggest a presence persistent across geography and time. Imagine, for a moment, a sailor in the North Atlantic. Fog thick around the deck, waves tossing the ship violently. The wind dies suddenly. The sea grows unnaturally still. Above, a bright light appears, a disk of glowing brilliance. It hovers, pulsates, then moves with impossible precision. The men clutch the rigging, terrified, yet entranced. They whisper prayers, fearing divine wrath, yet part of them wonders, what is this craft, and who or what occupies it? Such encounters were rare but memorable, recorded in journals intended for posterity. And centuries later, we read them with the same mixture of awe and unease. The Age of Sail also brought technological leaps. Mariners learned to chart latitude and longitude, to read the stars with precision, to understand wind and current. Their tools, compasses, sextants, astrolabes, allowed them to observe the world more accurately than any previous generation. And yet, despite these tools, they could not explain the phenomena above the horizon. The glowing discs, orbs, and vessels resisted analysis, appearing and disappearing at will. They were not bound by the limitations of human observation. They remained a mystery. These reports also raise the question of intent. Why appear now, over these oceans, to these sailors? Were the visitors studying humanity, observing our expansion into the world, watching the early steps of global exploration? Were they attempting communication, leaving signs that could be interpreted only by those who looked carefully, those willing to record and question? Or were they simply present, indifferent, their craft moving across the sky as it had for millennia, above every civilization that has ever looked up? The suspense of these centuries lies in this very ambiguity. Sailors could describe what they saw, but they could not understand it. They could measure wind and tides, record latitude and longitude, navigate storms. Yet these objects remained beyond human comprehension. They were observers in a world that could not yet recognize them. Chroniclers recording history unknowingly alongside something far older and greater than humanity itself. And so, as you close your eyes, imagine the age of sail. Picture the wooden deck under moonlight, the sound of waves, the wind in the sails. Above, a disk of light glides silently, casting reflections on the water. The sailors look up, fear and awe mingling in their hearts. They record their sight in careful, measured words, knowing it is extraordinary yet unable to explain it. Their journals survive centuries, carrying the memory forward. And centuries later, we read them and feel that same mixture of fascination and unease, knowing that the story of visitors from the sky continues, unbroken, across the ages. The Industrial Age was a period of immense transformation. Factories belched smoke into the skies, trains rattled across continents, and cities grew taller and louder with every decade. Humanity had begun to reshape the world on an unprecedented scale. Yet as human activity surged below, the skies above remained a realm of mystery, a space where strange lights, unexplained objects, and unusual occurrences persisted. Machines of men had grown powerful, but the heavens still held secrets beyond their understanding. It was an age of invention, of engines and iron, yet the skies were filled with reports of phenomena that could not be explained by steam or electricity. In 1840, near the coast of England, witnesses reported a luminous object hovering over the cliffs, moving with a grace that no balloon, kite, or mechanical device could replicate. Newspapers described it cautiously, some claiming it was a comet, others fearing divine warning. Yet the descriptions were precise, circular, glowing, moving with purpose, and vanishing without a trace. Across the Atlantic, in the United States, reports grew in frequency as railroads and telegraphs connected distant cities. In 1897, the most famous wave of sightings occurred. People across Texas, Kansas, and Missouri reported seeing cigar-shaped objects gliding across the sky. These airships, as newspapers called them, were described in great detail. Lights along their sides, holes gleaming in the sun, movement that defied the capabilities of contemporary aviation. Some witnesses claimed to see figures inside, humanoid forms operating controls, observing the ground below. Too many, it seemed impossible, yet the reports were documented by credible observers, some even corroborated by multiple towns simultaneously. These early encounters coincided with the rise of industrial innovation. Factories, trains, and telegraphs transformed society. Yet technology could not explain the sudden appearance of these crafts. The objects moved with precision, defying gravity, and seemed aware of their engineers and inventors of the time speculated, some dismissing the reports, others intrigued, wondering if these phenomena represented human ingenuity beyond their comprehension, or something altogether foreign. Europe, too, was rife with sightings. In the 1870s and 1880s, reports of luminous disks and elongated objects appeared over Paris, London, and Berlin. Observers described lights hovering in formation, sometimes descending toward the ground, leaving traces or disturbances in the air. Military officers, scientists, and ordinary citizens all recorded encounters. The events were treated seriously, often prompting investigations or reports to local authorities. And yet, no explanation ever fully satisfied the witnesses. The objects moved too deliberately, too intelligently, to be mere optical illusions or meteorological phenomena. Imagine a factory worker in Manchester in 1882. He leaves the smog of the city behind, stepping into the cool night. Above him, a glowing cylinder appears, silent, hovering over the fields beyond the town. He watches, mesmerized, as it shifts, ascends, and disappears. He tells his colleagues, some scoff, some nod, but the image stays with him. In his mind, the world has grown complex with steam and iron, yet above it all, something unexplainable has appeared. He records it in a notebook, a diary, or a letter, preserving a glimpse of the unknown for the centuries to come. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Industrial Age encounters is how the witnesses' perspective had changed. Unlike in previous eras, these observers were trained to think in terms of machinery, mechanics, and scientific principles. Sailors and peasants of earlier centuries often interpreted lights as divine or supernatural. Industrial Age observers, however, used the language of technology. They described airships, engines, and propellers, even when no such machines could exist. They recorded movement, trajectory, speed, and structural form. These descriptions hint at an intelligence adapting to the observational framework of humanity, presenting itself in terms we could understand, yet still defying explanation. Consider the wave of airship sightings in 1896 to 1897. Some reports described these craft hovering silently over towns, with lights along their hulls, and humanoid figures visible at observation points. Others claimed the objects maneuvered with deliberate precision, stopping, reversing, and accelerating in ways impossible for human-made craft of the era. Skeptics argued mass hysteria, exaggeration, or hoaxes, yet the consistency across regions, the number of credible witnesses, and the detailed reports suggest a more profound mystery. It was also a period when the world was beginning to shrink. Telegraphs sent messages instantaneously, newspapers reached far corners, and ideas spread faster than ever before. And yet, despite these advances, these aerial visitors remained elusive. No matter how connected humanity became, no one could capture or fully explain them. They appeared, were observed, and vanished, leaving only curiosity, speculation, and recorded memory. Even scientists could not ignore the evidence. Astronomers, meteorologists, and engineers occasionally noted unexplained objects in their records, sometimes with precise measurements. Yet the phenomena were transient, unpredictable, and resistant to classification. Unlike planets, comets, or weather events, these objects exhibited apparent intelligence. They hovered, changed direction abruptly, and seemed aware of human observation. This subtle intelligence makes the reports all the more intriguing, suggesting interaction rather than random natural occurrence. Imagine standing on the banks of the Mississippi River in 1897, looking up at a sky filled with the glow of a cigar-shaped craft. The river reflects the light, creating a mirror image that seems to double its presence. A crowd gathers along the shore, whispering, pointing, recording what they see. Children cry, adults speculate, journalists jot notes. For a moment, human progress, the iron, the steam, the telegraph feels small, insignificant in the face of this unknown. The sky, vast and silent, reminds humanity that no matter how far industry has carried us, the universe remains filled with wonder and questions. The Industrial Age also marked a turning point in human imagination. Artists, writers, and inventors were inspired by these encounters. Science fiction emerged as a genre, exploring the possibility of visitors from other worlds. Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and others drew from both imagination and the extraordinary events reported in the skies. The industrialized mind, with its attention to mechanics and observation, began to blend with wonder, creating stories that bridged the line between reality and speculation. Yet even in fiction, there remained a kernel of truth, the suggestion that humans had always been visited, always observed, always part of a story much larger than their own. And so, as we drift into reflection, picture the Industrial Age night sky. Factories' chimneys rise in silhouette. The sound of steam and iron hums in the distance. Above, a luminous airship glides silently, lights flickering, moving with intelligence. Citizens pause, workers drop tools, children gasp, observers write notes in journals or send letters. No one understands the craft, yet its presence is undeniable. Humanity, riding the wave of progress, realizes that no matter how far it reaches, the skies above continue to hold mysteries that may have watched over us for centuries. The Industrial Age teaches us a lesson. As human power grows, so does our awareness of the unknown. We measure, we observe, we calculate, and yet, even amid steam and steel, lights appear in the sky that resist explanation. They connect us to the past, linking Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, the Middle Ages, and the Age of Sail in a continuum of encounters. The thread is unbroken. The sky has always been a stage for the unexplained, and humanity has always looked up in awe, fear, and wonder. As you drift into sleep, imagine the glow of those airships above a quiet town, the hum of machinery below, and the realization that even in an age of human achievement, there are still questions unanswered, visitors unaccounted for, and mysteries that continue to watch, silently, from the stars. The Industrial Age is a reminder that human ingenuity cannot yet rival the unknown. that the sky has always been alive with phenomena that connect the centuries, and that the story of visitors from beyond Earth continues unbroken across time and space. The dawn of the 20th century brought unprecedented change. Humanity took to the skies in ways that were once the realm of dreamers. Airplanes sliced through clouds, radio waves carried voices across continents, and scientific observation became ever more precise. Yet even as the world embraced modernity, the sky retained its mysteries. Strange lights, unexplained phenomena, and objects that moved with impossible precision began to be reported with greater frequency, giving rise to a new chapter in the story of visitors from above. The first half of the 20th century is particularly fascinating because it marks the convergence of human technological progress and persistent unexplained observation. Witnesses now had tools and vocabulary to describe what they saw, and their reports were often supported by multiple observers, sometimes even recorded on film or radar. Yet the more we understood about the heavens, the more certain events defied explanation. The modern era had begun, but the skies reminded humanity that knowledge alone could not account for everything. One of the earliest and most remarkable waves of sightings occurred during the 1940s. The world was at war. Technology advanced rapidly, and people were primed to observe the skies. Pilots, trained to notice the smallest anomaly in the air, began reporting lights and craft that moved in ways impossible for any known aircraft. In 1947, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold observed 9 crescent-shaped objects near Mount Rainier in Washington. He described them as saucer-like in motion, skipping across the sky like stones on water. His report was published in newspapers, sparking a wave of sightings that would mark the birth of the modern UFO phenomenon. The terminology of flying saucers captured the public imagination, but the significance went beyond words. These were trained observers, people who understood the mechanics of flight and the limitations of aircraft. Their reports were detailed, precise, and often corroborated by radar operators, military personnel, and multiple civilian witnesses. What they described: craft moving at incredible speed, stopping abruptly, and performing maneuvers beyond human capability, challenged the boundaries of technology and comprehension. The post-war years saw an explosion of reports. Across the United States and Europe, witnesses described glowing discs, cigar-shaped objects, and strange formations in the night sky. Sometimes they appeared over cities, other times over remote wilderness, observed by farmers, police officers, and military personnel alike. Each report, though unique in detail, shared a striking consistency: intelligence, control, and intentionality. The objects were not random phenomena. They were deliberate, observant, and aware. Even governments took notice. In the United States, the Air Force launched Project Blue Book to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects. While some sightings were dismissed as weather balloons, meteors, or conventional aircraft, many remained unexplained. Pilots described objects that defied gravity, accelerated beyond known limits, and moved in ways that violated the laws of physics. Radar operators recorded blips moving impossibly fast, and in some cases, multiple witnesses observed the same craft simultaneously. The evidence, though often dismissed publicly, created a quiet unease within military and scientific circles. Globally, sightings continued. In 1952, Washington, D.C. experienced a series of radar-confirmed UFO sightings that panicked the capital. Glowing objects darted across the sky, observed by both pilots and radar operators. Interceptor jets were scrambled, but the objects moved with impossible speed, disappearing and reappearing unpredictably. Newspapers covered the events with fascination and fear. Citizens watched in awe as the modern sky revealed something beyond human control, something that had been observing humanity quietly for centuries. The psychological impact of these events cannot be overstated. In earlier centuries, unexplained lights were interpreted as divine signs or portents. In the modern age, the interpretation shifted to technology, intelligence, and mystery. People were no longer thinking of angels or demons. They were thinking of craft, pilots, or beings beyond Earth. Yet the fundamental feeling was the same: awe, fear, and the profound realization that the universe might hold others who watched, waited, and moved with purpose. Consider the stories of civilian witnesses. Families watching from their windows saw discs hovering silently over their homes. Farmers walking their fields noticed lights moving against the wind, impossible to chase or follow. In small towns, children and adults alike described figures within the craft, humanoid forms observing silently. These accounts, recorded in diaries, letters, and newspapers, built a tapestry of mystery that connected the modern era to ancient reports. The pattern was unbroken. Humanity had always been observed, and the sky continued to whisper that truth. It is also important to note that the early UFO waves coincided with rapid scientific advancement. Rockets, jet engines, and radar technology were developing at unprecedented speed. Yet the objects witnessed often surpassed the limits of contemporary human engineering. They performed maneuvers that would not be achievable with known materials or propulsion systems. Witnesses consistently described craft that accelerated instantaneously, changed direction abruptly, and defied inertia. The modern sky, despite human ingenuity, still contained phenomena that could not be explained. One particularly chilling aspect of these early sightings is the sense of intelligence behind them. Unlike natural phenomena, meteors, auroras, or atmospheric reflections, these craft behaved in ways that suggested awareness. They observed humans, adjusted their paths, and sometimes seemed to respond to attention. This implies deliberate presence, a conscious entity behind the craft. Across continents and decades, from private pilots to military radar operators, this sense of intelligence recurs in the reports. It is as though the visitors from the sky have always understood humanity and always chosen when, where, and how to reveal themselves. Imagine, then, a 1950s night over a quiet American town. Streetlights cast soft glows on roads, children are tucked in their beds, and the hum of domestic life fills the air. Above, a disk of light glides silently, casting a reflection across the river. Police officers arrive, curious and alarmed. Civilians watch, mesmerized. The craft moves in ways impossible for known aircraft, stops, hovers, and then disappears. No sound, no warning, only the haunting memory left in the minds of witnesses. For them, the modern sky has become a theater of the unexplained, a continuation of a story that spans centuries. The modern UFO waves also created a cultural shift. Literature, cinema, and media began to incorporate the idea of visitors from other worlds, shaping public imagination. From pulp magazines to blockbuster films, humanity began to speculate on what these beings wanted, why they appeared, and whether they were observers, explorers, or something else entirely. The fascination with the skies, once cloaked in superstition and religion, became intertwined with curiosity, science, and the hope of discovery. Yet amidst all the speculation, the mystery persists. Despite decades of observation, study, and reporting, these craft remain elusive. They are glimpsed, recorded, and analyzed, yet their nature remains unknown. What began as whispered accounts in ancient civilizations has evolved into a global phenomenon, still unresolved, still captivating, still unexplainable. The modern sky continues the story of the ancients, reminding us that the universe is vast, mysterious, and perhaps populated by entities whose intentions are beyond our understanding. As you settle into the quiet of the night, imagine the world of the 20th century, the dawn of the modern era. Picture pilots scanning the horizon, radar operators watching blips move impossibly fast, families observing glowing disks in the darkness. The skies, once a canvas for angels, demons, and divine portents, have become a theater for the unknown. And as history shows us, from Mesopotamia to Rome, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Age of Sail, the Industrial Age, and now the modern era, humanity has always been observed, always. The thread of mystery continues, a whisper across centuries, reminding us that the story is far from over. The Cold War was a time of tension, secrecy, and paranoia. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, raced to dominate the skies, the seas, and space itself. Satellites, reconnaissance planes, and nuclear deterrence became the defining symbols of human power. Yet even as humanity flexed its technological muscles, strange lights and unidentified craft continued to populate the sky. In fact, the rapid expansion of observation and surveillance during this period only made these anomalies more visible and more impossible to ignore. The 1940s and 1950s had already introduced the world to the modern UFO phenomenon. Now, As nations invested in radar, jet fighters, and spy networks, the skies became both more monitored and more mysterious. Objects appeared at high altitudes, moving faster than any aircraft could, appearing and disappearing in moments. Military pilots, trained to respond to intruders, reported craft that defied gravity, acceleration, and maneuverability. Radar operators recorded blips that vanished when jets approached, leaving no trace. These were not the random lights of folklore. These were intelligent, deliberate presences. One of the most famous incidents of this era occurred in 1967 near Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. Security officers reported multiple UFOs hovering near nuclear missile silos. Alarmingly, several missiles became temporarily inoperative, as though the craft could interfere with the technology of humans. The event, documented in military reports and later confirmed by investigators, raised chilling questions. Were these visitors monitoring humanity's most dangerous weapons? Were they testing our technology, warning us, or simply observing? The answers remain unknown, but the implications are undeniable. The Cold War also fueled government secrecy. Both superpowers were concerned that unexplained aerial phenomena could be mistaken for advanced enemy technology. UFO sightings were taken seriously, investigated with both curiosity and caution. Projects like the US Air Force's Project Blue Book, Canada's Project Magnet, and the Soviet Union's secret investigations into unidentified aerial phenomena sought to catalogue, analyze, and, when possible, dismiss these events. Yet despite years of study, many cases defied explanation. The very institutions tasked with explaining them admitted, in classified reports, that some craft operated in ways far beyond human engineering. Consider the wave of sightings in 1952. Over Washington, D.C. radar operators detected fast-moving, high-altitude objects that moved in precise formation. Jets were scrambled, yet the objects accelerated beyond pursuit, appearing and disappearing at will. News coverage brought the phenomenon to the public, yet the government was forced to tread carefully. Investigators documented each encounter meticulously, but the secrecy surrounding national security complicated explanations. The world began to realize that these phenomena were not confined to folklore, rural farms, or isolated witnesses. They were crossing into spaces of intense human observation, and still they resisted identification. The Cold War era also gave rise to iconic images and reports, many of which remain classified or partially redacted. Pilots reported seeing glowing discs performing maneuvers impossible for any known aircraft. Some accounts describe craft appearing in restricted airspace, then vanishing moments before intercept. Radar records confirm blips moving at impossible speeds, leaving trained observers baffled. Often, military documents show a remarkable honesty. These phenomena could not be explained by weather, birds, or technology of the time. They were deliberate, intelligent, and aware. But what makes the Cold War era especially haunting is the question of intent. Why appear now, when humanity's power had grown to unprecedented levels? The world was capable of nuclear destruction, capable of reaching beyond Earth with rockets and satellites. Were these visitors observing the most dangerous technology humans had ever created? Were they attempting to communicate, or merely studying the consequences of our expanding technological footprint? Or were they indifferent, as they had been for millennia, watching silently while humans danced precariously on the edge of annihilation? Imagine a night in the 1960s over a US military base. Radar screens hum with data. Pilots scan the skies with binoculars. Technicians record every anomaly. Suddenly, a disk of brilliant light appears, hovering near a missile silo. Jets are scrambled. The object moves in ways no aircraft can, stopping and reversing instantly, blinking in and out of sight. Security officers report electronic disruptions. Orders are given to remain calm. Documents are logged, filed, and classified. And when the event concludes, the witnesses are left with awe, fear, and an unsettling awareness. The sky has always been alive with intelligence beyond our understanding, and it still watches. The Cold War also coincided with a broader public fascination with space. Sputnik launched by the Soviet Union, humans began exploring space, and science fiction blossomed in literature and cinema. The possibility of intelligent life beyond Earth was no longer just speculation. It became a subject of scientific inquiry, philosophical debate, and cultural imagination. And yet, The sightings that occurred on Earth reminded humanity that contact, or at least observation, had been happening long before we sent rockets into orbit. The modern sky became a bridge between imagination and reality, between historical patterns and contemporary experience. Even ordinary citizens were not immune to the mystery. Families reported strange lights, disks, and formations over their homes and towns. Farmers observed craft in fields, disappearing when approached. Children glimpsed glowing figures in the night sky. Across continents, the reports share astonishing similarities, echoing centuries of observation. The narrative of visitors from above remained continuous, intelligent, observant, elusive. The Cold War intensified human scrutiny of the skies, yet the phenomena only persisted, suggesting that their presence is independent of our attention, unaffected by our attempts to control or categorize them. The secrecy of governments also created a layer of suspense that persists today. Classified documents, leaked reports, and declassified investigations reveal a tension between knowledge and concealment. Authorities acknowledge cases they could not explain, but public statements often downplayed or dismissed them. This duality is simultaneous awareness and secrecy adds to the enduring mystery. Humans, for the first time in history, had the technology to observe the skies in detail, yet the visitors remained uncatchable, unseen except by the careful and observant few. As you drift deeper into this story, imagine a Cold War night, a time of surveillance, secrecy, and vigilance. Radar hums, jets scramble, and a glowing disk appears above a missile silo. Officers watch, unable to intervene, aware only of the extraordinary presence. This scene, repeated in countless forms across decades, underscores a profound truth. The sky has always been a theater of intelligence, observation, and mystery. From ancient civilizations to the modern military-industrial world, the story is continuous. Humans have always been watched, studied, and perhaps guided or warned in ways we cannot fully comprehend. The Cold War skies teach a chilling lesson. Human power and observation may increase, but intelligence beyond our understanding persists. Technology alone cannot explain these phenomena. History, secrecy, and modern observation all point to a persistent pattern. The sky is never empty, and visitors, whatever they may be, continue to observe, silently, deliberately, and without interruption. As you settle into the quiet of the night, picture the Cold War era. Radar operators monitoring, jets standing by, citizens gazing upward, and above them all, the silent, intelligent presence of visitors from beyond. The thread of observation, begun millennia ago, continues through time, reminding us that the universe is alive with mystery, that humanity is not alone, and that the story of visitors from the sky has yet to reach its conclusion. The late 20th century and early 21st century have brought humanity closer to the stars than ever before. Satellites orbit the Earth, telescopes peer deep into distant galaxies, and human missions touch the moon and send robots to Mars. Yet despite all our progress, the skies above our cities, oceans, and deserts remain a theater of mystery. Reports of unidentified flying objects have grown in number, complexity, and credibility, stretching across continents and cultures, connecting modern humans to the long, continuous history of watchers from the sky. What makes modern UFO reports so compelling is the convergence of eyewitness testimony, technology, and global communication. Today, ordinary people carry cameras in their pockets. Pilots and air traffic controllers monitor the skies with radar, and social media allows instant sharing of observations. Yet even with this network of observation, sightings continue to confound scientists and authorities alike. Objects appeared that defy conventional understanding, crafts moving at incredible speed, hovering silently for long durations, or performing maneuvers impossible with known physics. One of the most famous waves of modern sightings occurred in the late 1970s and early 1980s. In 1980, a series of encounters over Belgium involved multiple witnesses and military radar confirmation. Triangular-shaped craft, sometimes glowing at the edges, moved silently across the night sky. Pilots scrambled, yet the objects outpaced every pursuit. Radar recorded sudden stops, changes in direction, and velocities far beyond any aircraft of the era. The Belgian Air Force documented the sightings with photographs, radar data, and witness testimony, creating one of the most thoroughly investigated UFO cases in history. Meanwhile, In the United States, UFO reports grew in visibility and detail. Civilian and military encounters were chronicled in local newspapers, scientific journals, and government investigations. In 2004, a U.S. Navy pilot recorded infrared footage of a fast-moving, cube-shaped object performing sudden maneuvers off the East Coast. The craft accelerated, stopped, and rotated in ways that defied explanation. The Pentagon eventually confirmed the authenticity of the video, sparking worldwide fascination and renewed investigation into the phenomenon. These incidents are part of a growing archive of modern encounters that challenge conventional thinking and invite questions about the nature of the visitors. What is striking about these modern reports is their global distribution. Sightings are not confined to one nation or culture. In South America, reports of luminous or metallic crafts over rural areas appear with astonishing regularity. In Africa and Asia, witnesses describe triangular, disc-shaped, or spherical objects that behave intelligently, often appearing in remote regions where human observation is minimal. In Europe, Asia, and Oceania, sightings continue to be reported by civilians, pilots, and law enforcement officials alike. The phenomenon transcends borders, technology, and language, suggesting a global presence that has been consistent across centuries. One particularly mysterious aspect of modern encounters is the apparent interaction with human technology. Radar blips, electronic interference, and even temporary disruptions of aircraft systems have been documented during encounters. In some cases, witnesses report craft that seem to respond to attention, accelerating when pursued or altering course when approached. Unlike natural phenomena, which follow predictable laws, these objects appear to act with awareness, exhibiting intelligence in ways that are both fascinating and unsettling. Consider, for a moment, a night over the Mojave Desert. A solitary pilot is conducting a routine training flight. Suddenly, a glowing triangular craft appears, hovering silently, lights flickering along its edges. The pilot's instruments briefly malfunction as the object ascends rapidly. Ground-based observers, trained in radar operation, confirmed the presence of an object moving at impossible speeds. The craft pauses, then accelerates beyond visibility, leaving only questions and a lingering sense of awe. This scenario, repeated in various forms across decades, encapsulates the persistent mystery of the modern sky. Another important development in the modern era is the increasing credibility of witnesses. Unlike earlier centuries, where sightings were often dismissed as superstition or illusion, today's reports come from trained observers, including commercial pilots, military personnel, astronauts, and radar operators. Their accounts are detailed, precise, and corroborated by instruments whenever possible. The consistency of these reports across time and location suggests that the phenomenon is real, not imagined, and that the sky has remained a stage for the unknown, just as it was in ancient civilizations and throughout history. Scientific inquiry into UFOs has also evolved. Programs such as the U.S. Department of Defense's Advanced Aerospace, Threat Identification Program, and other research initiatives aim to analyze sightings, radar data, and physical evidence. While skepticism persists, the accumulation of credible reports challenges the assumption that all unexplained aerial phenomena can be dismissed. Modern science has equipped humanity with tools to observe and measure, yet these phenomena continue to resist full understanding. The more we know, the more we realize how much remains unknown. Global reports also highlight a recurring theme: the intelligence behind the objects. Witnesses consistently describe craft that appear aware, purposeful, and responsive. They do not move randomly. They maneuver, hover, and accelerate with precision. Sometimes they appear to observe human activity, sometimes they disappear entirely when approached. This sense of deliberate presence connects modern reports to centuries of sightings. From ancient civilizations observing glowing disks in the sky to Cold War radar encounters, the pattern is unbroken. A continuous thread linking humanity to a presence beyond comprehension. Even cultural impact cannot be ignored. Movies, documentaries, books, and news coverage have made UFOs a part of global consciousness. Yet, despite this proliferation, the phenomenon retains its mystery. Sightings continue to defy classification, technological explanation, or cultural bias. Humanity has never ceased to wonder what or who occupies the skies above, and this curiosity is reflected in the stories passed from generation to generation. Imagine now a quiet night in the Amazon rainforest. Villagers observe a luminous orb moving silently between the trees, hovering for minutes before disappearing. Hunters and elders witness it, recording its motion in memory, sketching shapes in the sand, and sharing the story by firelight. Thousands of miles away, in urban centers, similar reports are recorded. Discs above skyscrapers, lights moving over highways, triangular craft above airports. Across deserts, oceans, and mountains, the same phenomenon repeats, connecting humanity through shared observation and shared mystery. Modern UFO phenomena also raise profound philosophical and existential questions. Are these visitors monitoring our technological progress, as some Cold War encounters suggested? Are they attempting communication, or merely observing quietly? Are they benevolent, indifferent, or something entirely beyond human comprehension? Across centuries, cultures, and continents, humanity has asked these questions, yet the answers remain elusive. The sky continues to remind us that human progress may not equate to understanding, that observation does not necessarily bring control, and that mystery persists even in an age of satellites, rockets, and digital communication. As you drift into sleep, picture the global stage of the modern sky. Pilots scan horizons, radar operators monitor blips, citizens observe glowing disks, and above them all, intelligent presences move silently, uncatchable, yet undeniably real. The story of visitors from the sky is not confined to any era, culture, or continent. It stretches from the earliest human records to the most technologically advanced societies, a continuous thread of observation, wonder, and suspense. Humanity has always looked up, and the sky has always responded, in ways we are only beginning to grasp. The modern era reminds us that the story is far from complete. With every radar blip, every infrared video, every credible witness, the narrative grows richer, more complex, and more mysterious. The sky remains a theater of intelligence, observation, and unexplained phenomena. From ancient civilizations to modern humans, the story of visitors from above continues, bridging history and present, connecting generations in a shared experience of awe, curiosity, and wonder. The 21st century has brought an era of transparency, technology, and global connectivity, yet it has also brought revelations that have rekindled humanity's fascination with the unknown. Governments, long silent or secretive about aerial phenomena, have begun to release previously classified reports, videos, and documents. These disclosures have not diminished the mystery. Instead, they have amplified it, revealing patterns, intelligence, and phenomena that challenge the very limits of human understanding. The modern world, armed with satellites, drones, and advanced surveillance, still cannot fully explain what is flying or watching above us. In 2017, the United States Department of Defense officially released videos captured by Navy pilots, showing fast-moving objects performing maneuvers impossible for any known aircraft. Blips on radar, infrared footage, and eyewitness accounts confirmed these crafts were real, physical, and intelligent. One video shows a craft accelerating at impossible speed, appearing and disappearing with precision, leaving pilots and analysts alike astonished. The objects were observed in controlled military airspace, tracked across multiple instruments, yet no explanation, technological, meteorological, or natural, satisfactorily accounted for the behavior. The release of these videos sparked a global conversation. Suddenly, the subject of UFOs, or UAPs, as the Pentagon now officially calls them, was no longer fringe speculation. It was an acknowledged phenomenon, witnessed by trained professionals, corroborated by instruments, and declassified by government authorities. Citizens, journalists, and scientists pored over footage, dissected maneuvers, and debated the implications. Questions arose. Are these craft human-made but highly advanced? Are they extraterrestrial? Are they an intelligence we cannot yet comprehend? The world realized that the sky, even today, remained a stage for phenomena beyond our control or understanding. Beyond the United States, reports continued worldwide. In Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America, sightings of unexplained aerial phenomena have surged in the past 2 decades. Witnesses describe craft hovering silently, performing sharp maneuvers, and sometimes interacting with military technology. Radar anomalies occur in multiple countries simultaneously, and visual sightings often coincide with instrument detection. The consistency of these reports, across borders and cultures, mirrors historical accounts from ancient civilizations, the Age of Sail, the Industrial Era, and the Cold War. The pattern of observation is continuous, suggesting that humanity has always been watched, studied, or monitored. One of the most compelling aspects of these modern revelations is the level of intelligence demonstrated by the craft. They are not erratic, uncontrolled objects. They exhibit awareness and deliberate behavior. They appear, pause, adjust their trajectory, and disappear at will. In some cases, pilots report craft that match or anticipate the maneuvers of pursuit aircraft, outmatching human technology by orders of magnitude. This intelligence, consistent across centuries of observation, challenges human assumptions about control, power, and the limits of our engineering. Declassified documents also reveal encounters that border on the chilling. In some military reports, unidentified craft have been observed near sensitive installations, nuclear sites, and strategic military facilities. Electronics fail, communications are disrupted, and instruments record anomalies that cannot be explained. These events echo patterns from the Cold War era, suggesting a long-standing interest or monitoring by entities that remain silent, elusive, and deliberately unobtrusive. Humanity may be powerful, curious, and technologically advanced, but the visitors above demonstrate an intelligence beyond our grasp. Even civilian reports contribute to the mystery. Drones, infrared cameras, smartphones, and social media allow for unprecedented documentation of strange phenomena. Yet, despite the technology, craft remain uncatchable, outpacing observation, avoiding capture, and performing maneuvers that continue to defy physics. Across deserts, oceans, and urban skies, these sightings replicate historical patterns: disks, triangles, spheres, and other shapes behaving intelligently, appearing and vanishing without warning. History, it seems, is repeating itself, yet with sharper clarity and more credibility than ever before. Some scientists and skeptics have attempted to provide conventional explanations, whether balloons, optical illusions, atmospheric phenomena, experimental aircraft, but these accounts rarely satisfy trained observers. Pilots, radar operators, and technicians report behavior that cannot be replicated by known technologies. Videos declassified by governments show maneuvers with no visible propulsion, extreme accelerations, and instantaneous stops. Witnesses are often left both fascinated and unnerved, aware that these crafts are real, deliberate, and beyond human creation. Consider, for a moment, a night over the Pacific Ocean. A Navy pilot is conducting routine training when radar detects multiple fast-moving objects. The pilot observes them visually, triangular craft with glowing lights along their edges. They hover, accelerate, and execute sharp turns with precision impossible for conventional aircraft. Infrared cameras capture their movement, and ground-based radar confirms anomalies. Analysts review the footage, baffled. No human explanation exists. The objects disappear into the night, leaving only questions and awe. This scenario is repeated across continents, reinforcing a global pattern of observation that connects the modern era to history itself. The implications of these revelations are profound. Humanity has always sought to explore, understand, and master its environment. Yet the sky remains a frontier of intelligence that we cannot command. Declassified documents, credible sightings, and recorded phenomena all point to the same conclusion. The universe is not empty, and humans are not alone. Whether these visitors are extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or from civilizations unknown, their presence is undeniable, persistent, and consistent across time. Modern revelations also challenge the human imagination. Movies, literature, and media have depicted extraterrestrial contact for decades, often blending fear and fascination. Yet reality, as revealed by declassified documents, radar reports, and eyewitness accounts, is far more complex. Observation is deliberate, silent, and intelligent. Communication, if it exists, is subtle and indirect. The sky is a stage, and humanity is both performer and audience, unaware of the full script. As you reflect, imagine a quiet night in the modern world. Satellites orbit silently, city lights glitter below, and drones scan the horizon. Above, unidentified craft glide effortlessly, performing maneuvers beyond comprehension. Trained professionals record, analyze, and report, Yet the objects remain elusive, intelligent, and deliberate. Declassified footage reveals their existence, but not their purpose. History has prepared humanity for these moments, from ancient glowing disks to Cold War radar anomalies, yet the final chapter remains unwritten. The 21st century, with all its transparency and technology, has not eliminated the mystery. Instead, it has sharpened it, revealing intelligence, consistency, and deliberate presence in a way that connects centuries of human observation. From ancient civilizations to the Age of Sail, the Industrial Era, the Cold War, and now the modern global stage, humanity has been observed. The sky is not merely a backdrop. It is a theater of intelligence, curiosity, and ongoing mystery. As you drift into sleep, picture the world today. Declassified footage, infrared cameras, radar screens, and ordinary witnesses. The sky is alive with the same intelligence that has been present across centuries. Humans may gaze upward, marvel at technology, and attempt to understand, but some questions remain unanswered. The story of visitors from the sky continues, persistent, deliberate, and infinitely mysterious, connecting us to the past and reminding us that the universe is far vaster and stranger than we have ever imagined. Throughout history, humans have looked to the skies with awe, curiosity, and sometimes fear. From the earliest cave paintings depicting strange shapes in the heavens, to the glowing disks reported by ancient civilizations, from the airships of the Industrial Age to Cold War radar anomalies, and now to declassified, modern footage, one thread remains unbroken: the presence of intelligence above us. It is a story that defies time, geography, and culture, connecting generations through shared wonder, unanswered questions, and the silent observation of the unknown. The eternal mystery lies not only in the objects themselves, but in the subtlety of their presence. They appear and vanish at will, move with intelligence, and remain beyond our ability to capture or control. Yet their presence is persistent, deliberate, and global. Human progress, from fire to electricity, from steam engines to nuclear missiles, has changed our world. Yet these visitors have remained, observing silently, as though guiding, testing, or simply watching. Their purpose, like their origin, remains unknown, leaving us to grapple with the boundaries of knowledge and imagination. Consider the countless witnesses across millennia: Mesopotamian priests recording lights in the sky, Egyptian astronomers noting fiery disks over the Nile, medieval chroniclers describing strange apparitions during wars and plagues, sailors marveling at glowing objects above uncharted waters, pilots during the Cold War tracking craft that defied physics, and modern civilians capturing footage with infrared cameras and smartphones. Each generation has seen them, documented them, and pondered their meaning. The continuity is striking, suggesting that these presences are not fleeting or random, but enduring and consistent. One of the most compelling aspects of this story is the apparent intelligence behind the phenomena. The objects are not erratic or haphazard. They move with purpose, respond to observation, and sometimes interact subtly with human technology. Whether disabling nuclear silos during the Cold War or evading jets in modern airspace, their actions suggest awareness and design. Humans have developed rockets, satellites, and advanced aircraft. Yet these visitors continue to operate beyond our understanding. They exist outside the limits of our engineering, in a realm of precision and intelligence that humanity has yet to match. Throughout history, interpretations of these phenomena have varied. Ancient cultures saw divine signs, omens, or celestial messengers. The Industrial Age offered mechanical explanations, describing airships, balloons, or experimental aircraft. The modern era adds technological analysis, radar tracking, and video evidence. Yet across all these interpretations, one constant remains: the sky is never empty, and humans are not alone. Observers, whether priests, sailors, pilots, or scientists, have all glimpsed the presence of something beyond comprehension. Modern declassified documents and global reports have made the phenomenon harder to ignore. Governments acknowledge encounters they cannot explain. Military personnel testify to impossible maneuvers, and scientific analysis confirms anomalies beyond conventional explanation. Yet despite increased transparency, the visitor remains elusive. The question is no longer whether they exist, but why they are here, how long they have been observing, and what their purpose might be. The answers remain elusive, inviting speculation, curiosity, and profound wonder. Imagine a night over a quiet city today. Streetlights cast their glow on streets, satellites orbit silently above, and ordinary people gaze upward, some noticing an unusual light moving against the wind. Perhaps it hovers briefly, accelerates beyond perception, or vanishes entirely. Pilots in nearby airspace observe blips on radar, confirming the sighting. Cameras capture the moment, yet the nature, origin, and intelligence behind the craft remain a mystery. This scene, repeated countless times worldwide, reflects a continuity that stretches across history, a reminder that the story of visitors from the sky is unfinished. The unanswered questions are what make this story so compelling. Who or what are they? Are they travelers from another world? Observers from a dimension beyond our perception, or entities whose existence operates under laws we have yet to discover? Why have they appeared consistently across centuries, cultures, and continents? What motivates them to observe, to appear, or to interact subtly with human affairs? These questions linger because the phenomena themselves provide no clear answers. They leave only evidence, witness testimony, and an unshakable sense of intelligence beyond our comprehension. Yet perhaps the most profound lesson of this history is humility. Humanity has grown immensely, from scattered tribes to global civilizations, mastering technology, medicine, and exploration. We have learned to fly, to communicate instantly across continents, to reach beyond Earth itself. And yet, despite all this progress, we are reminded that intelligence exists outside our understanding, that observation precedes comprehension, and that the universe contains mysteries that endure regardless of human achievement. The eternal thread of observation stretches from ancient Mesopotamia to modern skies, linking generations, continents, and cultures. From glowing discs over temples to the infamous Roswell incident, from Cold War radar blips to Navy infrared footage, humanity has always been part of a larger narrative. We are both witnesses and actors in a story that transcends history, a story of intelligence, observation, and curiosity that refuses to be fully explained. As you imagine this, picture the skies over deserts, oceans, cities, and forests. Craft of unknown origin glides silently, lights flickering, movements deliberate. Observers of all kinds, pilots, scientists, civilians, children look upward, recording, marveling, and wondering. Across millennia, the pattern is consistent, the presence undeniable. From ancient priests to modern military personnel, humanity has been watched, studied, and perhaps guided. The story is not complete. It is ongoing, persistent, and eternal. In the end, the mystery remains because some questions are larger than immediate answers. Who or what occupies the skies above us? What is their purpose, their intent, and their origin? These are questions humanity may never fully resolve, yet they are questions that have inspired awe, imagination, and vigilance for centuries. They remind us that no matter how advanced we become, some aspects of existence lie beyond control, waiting to be observed, contemplated, and respected. As you drift into sleep, envision the silent, intelligent presence above. The universe stretches endlessly, yet threads of observation connect the past to the present. The story of visitors from the sky is ongoing, a reminder of humanity's small place in the cosmos and of mysteries that defy comprehension. Every glowing light, every sudden movement, every unexplained anomaly is part of a narrative that spans millennia. Humanity is both observer and observed, participant and audience, and the sky eternal, mysterious, and alive continues to watch. So remember, whenever you look up, you are part of a story older than civilization itself. A story that has persisted across every era of human history. The sky has never been empty. It holds intelligence, observation, and secrets that stretch from the first human gaze to the modern era and beyond. The story is unfinished. The mystery endures. And perhaps, just perhaps, the most remarkable part is that we are still here to witness it, to marvel, and to wonder what comes next. From the first flicker of lights in the skies over ancient Mesopotamia to the declassified footage of modern military encounters, one thing is clear: humanity has always been watched. These visitors, whether extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or operating by laws we cannot yet comprehend, have left a continuous thread across time, connecting civilizations, eras, and cultures in silent observation. They appear, vanish, and move with intelligence that challenges our understanding, reminding us that even in the age of satellites, rockets, and instant communication, the universe still holds mysteries far beyond our control. The story of aliens across history is unfinished. It invites curiosity, and humility, revealing that while humans have progressed technologically and scientifically, there are forces and intelligences that remain beyond our grasp. Every sighting, every account, and every unexplained phenomenon is a piece of a larger puzzle, a whisper across centuries that the cosmos is alive with observation. As you look to the skies tonight, remember, the mystery is ongoing, the intelligence above is deliberate, and the story continues. Humanity is both observer and observed, and the sky eternal, silent, and enigmatic holds secrets that may never be fully revealed. The universe is far stranger and more fascinating than we can imagine, and our place within it is both humbling and extraordinary. The watchers above remain, as they always have, a timeless reminder that some stories are bigger than us, older than civilization, and far from finished. Tonight, as you close your eyes, remember the sky is watching, and its story is far from over. Good night, traveler. Have a nice sleep until we meet again.